Have you ever felt satisfied after buying a business book, enrolling in an online course, or purchasing a new work gadget, as if your life had just moved one step forward? A few weeks later, the book is still unopened. The course remains unfinished, and the expensive gadget is mostly used for scrolling through social media. Oddly enough, the guilt rarely feels strong enough to stop the habit, so another purchase quietly begins to look like a fresh start. We often call it investing in ourselves, even when it quietly becomes consumption wrapped in the language of productivity. Modern life has become remarkably good at selling hope, not only through products, but through the feeling that buying something means becoming someone better. The problem is that money does not respond to good intentions, because financial change only appears when knowledge becomes real action. At the margin, we believe the most expensive financial decision is not always the biggest purchase, but sometimes the one that creates the feeling of progress without any real movement. Today we're looking at the trap of productive spending, why our brains slip into it so easily, and a framework called the ROI test. A product now seems to exist for almost every problem, whether the goal is becoming more productive, more successful, or more disciplined. Buying useful tools or learning new skills is not the issue, but purchasing can quietly begin replacing the work itself. The collection keeps growing while actual progress stays in the same place, making ownership feel like achievement. Psychologically, this pattern makes sense because the brain naturally enjoys anything that feels like progress, even when it is only perceived. Purchasing something linked to self-improvement can trigger dopamine that feels surprisingly similar to reaching a real milestone. That feeling can convince the brain that part of the job is already finished, even though the difficult work has not yet begun. Buying takes only a few minutes, while building real ability usually demands hundreds of hours over a much longer time horizon. Over time, the spending continues while skills and income fail to compound at the same pace, creating a widening gap. Because the purchases look productive, it becomes easy to feel responsible about the future while unused potential quietly keeps piling up. As purchases become more frequent, recognizing that the real work is being postponed can become increasingly difficult. One of the most expensive psychological biases is the progress illusion, where simply preparing can feel almost identical to making real progress. Preparation has value, but when planning keeps growing while action never starts, it quietly turns into a form of delay that is difficult to recognize. Imagine someone who wants to become a runner and buys premium shoes, a new fitness watch, matching workout clothes, and a high-end water bottle before the first run. Every purchase supports a good goal, yet without ever running, none of those items make the body healthier. The same pattern appears in careers and personal finance when people buy cameras, software, or stacks of investing books before taking the first real step. The problem is rarely laziness, but the quiet belief that preparation deserves the same value as execution, even though results usually come from what people do rather than what they own. Ironically, the more expensive the purchase becomes, the stronger the urge to believe it was the right decision even when the expected progress never appears. One productive purchase often leads to another, not because the first one worked, but because the next one seems like it finally might. Without noticing, the bank balance keeps shrinking while unfinished projects keep growing, leaving behind a heavier mental load instead of completed work. So, how do you tell the difference between a worthwhile investment in yourself and consumption that only disguises itself as productivity, and why does the ROI test matter? The real question is not whether buying books or courses is wrong, but when an investment in yourself quietly starts becoming a financial burden instead. The value begins to fade when something you purchased no longer changes your daily behavior over time. One book that gets read may influence your thinking, while 10 untouched books can become nothing more than expensive decoration. James Clear wrote that people do not rise to the level of their goals, but fall to the level of their systems, making purchased knowledge alone look like readiness without changing anything else. Many people keep folders full of online courses they never open again after the first day, leaving information untouched while implementation stops. Imagine someone buying a professional camera for thousands of dollars to become a content creator, Yet 6 months later, the camera remains stored away and no videos have been uploaded. The issue is not the camera itself, but the belief that buying the tool automatically brings someone closer to the goal. In finance, an asset is expected to produce something. So, a productive purchase that creates no new skill, income, or habit may simply be consumption wearing a different label. The sooner these purchases are evaluated, the smaller the long-term cost becomes compared with carrying the same habit for years. That is why spending decisions are often examined through the likelihood of producing a real result instead of relying only on temporary excitement. This is where the ROI test becomes useful, except ROI here means return on implementation rather than return on investment. The framework begins with one simple question about the specific action you will take immediately after making a purchase. If your answer sounds like, "I'll study it later," or "when I have time," that may signal the purchase was driven more by emotion than by a concrete plan. If you can already describe exactly when you will begin and where you will apply it, the purchase carries a much clearer path toward creating value. One technology manager described owning more than 50 unfinished online courses before deciding not to buy another until finishing the existing ones. The point of that story is not that courses are bad, but that having too many choices can leave people taking fewer actions. Before buying something labeled as self-investment, ask what your first action will be when it will happen, and what measurable result you expect within 30 days. If those 3 questions still have no clear answers, waiting may remain part of the decision while unfinished work stays on the desk. This framework is presented as protecting not only money but also attention, which can become an even scarcer resource over a long time horizon. Over time, the idea suggests that productivity is associated less with owning more tools and more with making fuller use of fewer ones. Many financial decisions are not really about what we need, but about the version of ourselves we want to feel like. A new laptop can make us feel like professionals. A business book can make us feel like entrepreneurs, and premium software can make us feel highly productive. Feeling like someone has changed does not automatically create the daily habits needed to actually become that person. One focused hour of real work usually carries more value than 1 hour spent searching for another tool to work with. Marketing often presents products as shortcuts to the version of ourselves we hope to become. High-quality tools may accelerate existing skills, but they cannot replace discipline that has never been built. In many situations, the strongest work comes from people who continue creating with the equipment they already have. The sooner we stop chasing perfect tools, the sooner something tangible can begin to exist, while intentions alone remain invisible. Before making another purchase, the more important question may simply be whether it will actually be used starting today. Wealth is not built by the amount of knowledge we purchase, but by the knowledge that eventually becomes work creating real value. After recognizing the trap of productive spending, real progress looks much simpler than the internet often makes it appear, without constantly needing new tools, courses, or technology. What remains is the ordinary work that keeps getting done every day, allowing small pieces of progress to accumulate without much drama. People who are genuinely productive often appear surprisingly boring because they spend more time finishing work than talking about how to finish it. By comparison, productive consumption often keeps people preparing for work that never actually begins, even as the preparation continues to expand. In financial terms, this creates 2 separate costs because money is spent on new tools while opportunities to earn are delayed at the same time. As the delay continues, the invisible costs also grow, including missed experience, missed connections, and opportunities that never have a chance to exist. Every purchase either speeds up real action or quietly replaces it, while even the best tool remains unused if it never enters daily work. It can begin to feel as though the missing piece is not additional information, but using information that has already been collected. Many people continue searching for another answer even while the answer they already collected quietly waits on their own desk without consistent action. As repeated action gradually becomes an ordinary habit, productivity no longer feels connected to buying something new and instead blends into everyday routines. Let's summarize today's episode by recognizing that not every purchase that looks financially smart actually moves you closer to your long-term financial goals. Books, courses, software, and gadgets are not the problem until buying them quietly replaces the time spent producing real work. The brain can create a satisfying feeling from preparation alone, even when meaningful action has not actually started. That is why the ROI test begins by asking what specific action will happen immediately after the purchase is completed. Without a clear implementation step, a purchase often becomes another unused item instead of additional capability. Money spent on learning does not automatically create value unless it is followed by a visible change in behavior. New tools, new apps, and new methods will continue to appear, but none of them replaces the decision to begin the work itself. Buying less for the appearance of productivity leaves more room for work that creates measurable value over the long term. Wealth does not grow from collecting more information alone, but from turning knowledge into work that creates value for other people. The idea of self-investment shifts away from acquiring more things and toward making fuller use of what is already available. If this video reminded you of purchases that never became part of your routine, there is no need to feel guilty about them, because what you choose to do from today is what matters in this moment. Maybe another course is not what is missing, and maybe finishing the one you already own matters more than adding another subscription or app. Every dollar you spend should move alongside the life you are building instead of only creating the brief feeling that progress has already happened. Before making your next purchase, pause for a moment and ask yourself the ROI test, because one simple question can influence far more than the price itself. If this conversation helped you look at money from a different perspective, I hope the margin can continue joining those future conversations with you. If you enjoy conversations like this, consider subscribing as we continue exploring money, investing, living costs, and financial behavior every week in the same calm way. What is one purchase you once considered an investment in yourself, and what lesson did that experience leave with you? Thank you for watching The Margin, and I'll see you again in the next episode as we continue examining the numbers and behavior behind everyday financial decisions.